can't all religions be true? Or can't all religions at least have some of the truth and none have all the truth? And this is quite often illustrated by the 6 blind men and the elephant. You ever heard this parable? This is what professors often use to try and convince students that, religions don't really have the truth. They kind of share the truth, but they're not really, one is not really more true than the other. They think they have the truth, but they really don't. And it's illustrated this way. There are 6 blind men, 6 blindfolded men, and one feels the ear of the elephant and thinks it's a fan. Another feels the side of the elephant and thinks it's a wall. Another grabs the tail and says, no, this is a rope. Another one grabs the leg and says, no, this is a tree. Another grabs the tusk and says, this is a spear. And another, of course, grabs the trunk and says, no, we've got a great snake here. Now, these 6 blind men are all supposed to represent the major world religions. They think they have the truth, but they don't really have the truth. They may have a piece of the truth, but they don't really have it. Now, how do you basically refute the conclusion that no religion is the truth? Here's the question to ask. What is the perspective of the parable teller? What is the perspective of the parable teller here? Can anyone tell me? Go ahead, loud, what? The parable teller can see everything. He can see the whole picture. The parable teller has an objective vantage point. It's like our position. We're looking at it and we're going, you knuckleheads, that's an elephant, right? So once you have an objective position, you can really see the truth. So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is, once I was blind, but now I see. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, if you take off your blindfolds and see, you can see it's absolutely true that that is an elephant, that it's not a rope, that it's not a snake, that it's not a spear, a wall, or a tree, or any of those other things. It's an elephant. So truth is not relative to the individual, otherwise we wouldn't know the blind men were mistaken. We have an objective viewpoint, as the parable teller does, and we can see that the blind men were mistaken. Also, you can't know someone is wrong unless you know what is right. Let me state that another way. You can't know that someone is not right unless you know what is right. So for you to say that, no, that's not a fan, that's not a spear, that's not a rope, etc., you would have to know what it is, correct? So the bottom line to the whole thing is the pluralist believes everyone is blind but him. The pluralist is somebody who's saying, no, all religions lead up the mountain, they're all getting there. They don't have the truth, that they have some of the truth, and you can't really know the truth, all that nonsense, okay? Why is the pluralist given an objective position, but we can't have that same objective position? If we take off our blindfolds, we can see the truth as well. Do you see what I'm saying here? In other words, the parable, as many college professors tell it, actually proves exactly the opposite to the point they're trying to make. They're trying to say that nobody has the truth, when the rest of us are going, yoo-hoo, Mr. Professor, that's an elephant. And we can do the same thing when it comes to religion. If we take off our blindfolds, we can discover the truth. And that's what we try and do in apologetics. We try and discover the truth, which is giving evidence for what you believe. But sometimes you'll have somebody say this, look, come on, all religions teach basically the same thing. Have you heard that? Don't they all teach basically the same thing? Come on, they all teach you ought to love one another. That's basically it. Is that true? No, actually, it's not true. There's a kernel of truth to it, that most religions do have a moral code, and quite frequently a relatively common moral code, but not all religions teach that you ought to love one another. Certainly Satanism doesn't, right? Certainly what I would call Orthodox Islam doesn't. People who follow the Quran and the teachings and life of Muhammad Because if you look at the Quran and you look at the life and teachings of Muhammad, what the terrorists are doing, they're doing as a result of studying the Quran and the life and teachings of Muhammad. So that's not love your neighbor, as we are all now too well aware. But actually, there's a question you should always ask people. In fact, there are 3 questions you should always ask people when they come up with a statement about religion like this. Actually, you can use these 3 questions for virtually anything. Here's the first question you ought to ask somebody who says something like this. The question is, what do you mean by that? What do you mean all religions teach basically the same thing? And see what they say. What do you mean by that? Why is that a good question? Because this right here is known as a slogan, isn't it? It's a common cultural saying, and few people stop to think about what it means. And if you ask them, what do you mean by that? Many of them will go, or the second question after that is, how did you come to that conclusion? And you could make that a little bit more specific to this statement by saying, how did you come to that conclusion? Have you studied world religions for yourself? What are most people going to say at that point? No, they're probably not going to have studied that, right? You can use these 2 questions with about anything you hear in religion or virtually any other topic. Because you will find that most people in our culture today have a worldview built on slogans. Maybe not most, but a good number of people. They hear slogans like this and they take that. They hear another slogan. The Bible's been changed throughout the centuries. They take that. The Bible was written long after Jesus. They take that. Evolution's true. They take that. And they put all of these slogans together and they go, this is my worldview, never realizing any of the evidence behind any of those slogans, any of the real particulars behind any of those slogans. And they go skipping through life thinking, I really know what's going on. As soon as you question them on it, though, they run short of intellectual justification for the slogan in about 3 seconds. Somebody says, you ought not believe the Bible because it's been changed throughout the centuries. You say, how did you come to that conclusion? Have you studied the manuscript evidence for yourself? You're not being mean here. You're just trying to find out where people are coming from. And every once in a while, you might find somebody who thinks they've studied it and has the truth. Okay? But ask those 2 questions. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? By the way, the third question is this. The third question is, have you ever considered? And then you can add what you want to add after that. Have you ever considered this book, for example? Like, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Or have you considered Mere Christianity, a great book on the Christian faith, particularly the moral argument? Or have you ever considered Evidence Demands a Verdict? Have you ever considered, Tim Keller's Reason for God? There's some good books out there. Or have you ever considered this argument? If you ask it in that way, it's not as offensive. You don't have to refute. Here's the thing I'm trying to say. You don't have the obligation to refute what somebody else says. They have the burden of proof to support what they've just said.